Wow, Athletor podcast back again. We are joined by Anthony Ferraro of movie and TikTok fame. Hello, Anthony.
Hello, Michael.
That's the part where we have to pretend that we don't know each other real well.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Nice to be here.
Big
Thank you.
fan.
So,
Big fan.
that's fucking great. Okay, but we do know each other very well. Joel Shaw doesn't know you at all, so let's pretend like you're just talking to him.
Sounds good.
Let's get the Anthony Ferraro origin story. What do you say?
Let's do it. Well, I was the youngest. I am the youngest of five. I grew up in Spring Lake, New Jersey, a little beach town. I was born blind with a degenerative eye condition called Leber's congenital amaurosis, which affects the retina. And when I was a kid, I had like some usable vision, and then as I grew older, bigger chunks kept like going. You know, I'd wake up one day and it'd be like a lot missing. And
Does that ever did that ever like wax and wane? Like did it like chunks would go missing and then they would come back for a minute or two and then they would go away again?
No, you knew if any went, then it's gone.
Right.
So that's the shitty part. But I was lucky enough to grow up in a family that my parents didn't let that ever be an excuse. The first thing they were ever told was treat your kid like the rest of your kids. And they did that. Like I grew up surfing, skateboarding, riding my bikes till I started hitting parked cars. My mom was like, no more of that shit. Just like a normal life, man. But like knowing I was a little different, and like I went to a school for the blind until 7th grade. So I'd commute from Spring Lake to Philly every day and then come home. And when I transferred to the public school, so when I was doing that, I was pretty much like had this routine where I grew up the youngest of five. My mom's the second oldest of 13. So I had 60 cousins that all ran around this area. So that was like a good way of like, hey, keep up, you know, like no one's waiting around. And it kept me like on my toes and wanting to keep up with everyone else. And when 7th grade came around, I transferred to the public school after I learned like how to be independent with Braille and technology. And then I was kind of in this like routine of when I was going to school in Philly, like especially my 5th and 6th grade years, where I would come home. I had one of those footrests that I would push all the way against the TV stand, and I would kneel on it and watch TV like 2 inches from the screen. And I would do that and eat like cheese doodles, and I was just not being very active. And my 2 older brothers were like, dude, you got to do something, man. Like you got to find like something, because it's already bad enough you're blind. You don't want to be blind and fat. And I don't know if that's like okay to say, but that's what they told me. And because they were very like athletic, you know. My brother Ollie took 5th in the state of wrestling, and
first of all, hold on, Ant. I gotta pause this story here for a second. Joel Shaw grew up in California, so he is uncomfortable laughing at some of your jokes. Like, just understand, like there were a lot of blind jokes going around the club during Anthony's formative years. And look, you like, here's what it is. If you can't laugh at this stuff, you probably because like, not that Joel wasn't laughing, because he was, but just so you know, Ant, he was like looking at me, so as almost like permission to laugh.
Like, is it okay to laugh?
Oh, it's gonna get funnier. Just you wait. Go ahead.
You better buck up, boyo. You better tap into any East Coast you can. But
anyway, sorry. So you're going to public school.
So they said that to me. I was kind of like, you know, you're right. And I always wanted to play football. My dad never let me. And our joke was like, Aunt, you're going to get blindsided. So football was out of the question. And then in 7th grade, I was like, screw it. Like, there was this guy, Brandon Scott, that wrestled for New Jersey. Really good blind wrestler. And I remember, like, hearing about him when my brother wrestled.
Red Bank, right?
Yeah, Red Bank Regional. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? Why don't I give it a shot? Because I grew up like trying like different blind sports. Like there's a thing called goal ball and all these other like blind golf and beep baseball, but I never really liked it that much. And then when I found wrestling, 7th grade, I went to Belmar Elementary like rec program, and I was this little chubby kid, man. I was like 160 pounds, no muscle really, just kind of tub. And I was like, I'm gonna go out and crush it. Like I'm gonna murder this. Like I'm gonna beat everyone. I'm gonna do great in this sport. And I went out and went like 2-12, and one of the wins was a forfeit. So it didn't go well. And my last match,
say the freaking least. It didn't go well. Are you sure?
it did not go according to plan. So the last match, I remember saying to my dad, I was like, dude, I need to get better at this. Like, I don't want to just be a mediocre blind kid at the sport. That's like, pat on the back, good job for like trying. I wanted to get good. And it was the first time in my life I
hold on. Let's pause, and I'm gonna continue to pause you because I know the story.
Pause me all the time.
But here's the thing. What, in your estimation, made you really want to get better at that? Was it because you were treated more like everyone else in wrestling, or was it just something that you think was innate in you?
It was kind of a combination. It was definitely innate. Like through my whole life, when I get into something, I almost get like, especially if I'm bad at it, I want to get good. Like it's like this, like I love that climbing the mountain from the bottom of like this whole grind of trying to get better. And because from there on, you only can, you're supposed to only get better from that point on. So like it stems back to something as little as, I remember when I was in like 4th grade, all my classmates could roll their R's, like something really stupid, right? And I wanted to roll my R's so bad, but I couldn't. Like I would be like, and I just couldn't do it. And I'll never forget, I would stay up late at night in 4th grade, just like trying to figure it out. Like I would ask everyone I could that knew how to do it, and I would just practice it till one night it was like 11 p.m. and it's just me and my dad in the kitchen. And I'm so like delusional. I'm laying on the kitchen floor trying to roll my R's. And I finally got it. And it was like the best feeling in the world. Like, wow, like putting the time in, I actually accomplished this. And it was like a really cool feeling. And
that's freaking awesome, by the way.
That
like as minuscule and as ridiculous as something like rolling your R's seems, there's something to be said for just keep on hacking away at it. Just keep hacking away, right? Just chop the wood until it's gone.
That's it. And I got like obsessed with trying, like just whatever it was. And when I think the one thing that really sparked the wrestling too was in that last match, I was doing okay, and I ended up getting pinned. And I was like, you kind of have, this happens to almost everyone and it kind of weeds out people, because everyone after they lose a match, they'll be like, I want to get better. And it's kind of that split moment where kids will have a drive, but then it'll kind of wean away in like, a couple weeks or so. Mm-hmm. Like they'll just forget about it. Me, I was like, I have to get better at this. Like,
which, by the way, if I remember correctly, your dad almost insisted that was going to happen to you, that you would not lose interest, but certainly lose motivation. That the sting of that last loss would go away, and you'd just go back to skateboarding and to park cars.
1000%. And he even says it like, oh, he just, he's bummed about the loss and whatever. So I used to bother him. I'd be like, Dad, like I need a wrestling club, because that's what people told me you needed to get better. And I was like, I need a wrestling club. He's like, all right, Ann, I'm looking. And like a couple weeks later, I'm like, Dad, did you find a club yet? And he's like, holy shit, you were like my cousin Vinny, you were serious about that, And like, I was just like begging him. And then he emailed you, and he said, my son's 160 pounds, finished up 7th grade season. He's blind. You see, one other thing, he's blind. And your response was like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that was like, dude, you accepting me in that moment was huge, because
just so we're clear, I didn't mean that it was awesome that you were blind.
I know what you meant.
Right, but it like just for clarity's sake, okay, I know but like it has to be said. It's not like I was like, that's the coolest. No, I just meant that I would I would invite the challenge of like, oh yeah, this dude is different in certain ways, and that was really exciting to me. So
Absolutely. And I'm so young.
proceed.
I'm so young. It seems almost normal too, though. Like I didn't realize how much of a unique situation it was at the time. And I started going to Rhino at Velocity and Wall. And I remember the first practice, like Gunther was there
Mhm.
and we were training. He was like showing me stuff. And I had never worked that hard in my life.
Mhm.
Like I remember leaving practice covered in sweat, like tired, my arms hurt, and I fell in love with it like that day. Like I was like, this is the best. Like I'm beat up, I'm tired, like I feel like I just worked my ass off. And I started falling in love with that. And we started developing a system where like you would show the moves on me so
Mhm.
I'd be able to feel what's going on and then I'd be able to go and drill.
Mhm.
And it was it was a journey, man. Like I got obsessed. I started going to a tournament every single weekend with my dad. And this was the worst part is I would be like, I'm going to a club. I'm going to win this tournament, whatever. It took me 3 months before I could even score a point in
Yeah.
a tournament because my bracket was always 3 state caliber kids every time. It was, I'll never forget Kenny Bradley, this guy, uh, Balboni, and then there was one other, this guy Connor Watson. And I remember going and just getting my ass kicked, and then finally, like, leaving the beach when my friends were chilling to go to Rhino and all this stuff. And I remember like the first time I beat Connor Watson, and you were there, and it was in Greco, and I teched him both periods or something, and I had never scored on that kid before, and like something
Mhm.
changed where I just felt this confidence and like just becoming obsessed with the sport. And I don't know why even. I was just like, I love this. And then in 8th grade, I ended up going like undefeated in my weight class and winning Tri-County. And when that happened, I was losing 13-0 in the finals. I'm on my feet. My dad's, yelling, don't give up, blah, blah, blah. And I ended up throwing the kid with a lat drop that I learned in Greco
Mhm.
and winning that match and being like, I wasn't even that excited. I was more like, holy shit, I can't believe I pulled that off. And when I walked off the mat, the kid shook my hand, no problem. The dad, this is the first time I ever experienced this, and then it got worse as time went on. But the dad came over and he's like, because in wrestling I had to stay in constant contact, the dad was like, this is an unfair advantage. Your son doesn't belong in this sport. He belongs in the Special Olympics. Like, tell him to find something else, all this stuff. And it was like, dude, I remember being like, how is this possible? I just worked my ass off to get to where I'm at, and you're trying to take it all away. And at the same time, I go home and find out that I was supposed to be accepted to a private school that both my brothers went to. I had a handwritten letter of acceptance in 7th grade. They were getting everything brailled. And then in 8th grade, that president died. And I got a letter and a phone call saying Anthony's no longer accepted to this school. He won't, fit in academically or environmentally. And I'm like 14 years old, man. I remember like punching a hole through my wall. I was so angry. Like that was a lot of my childhood, was like a lot of anger at the world, at like unfairness, and just pissed off at being blind. And I feel like wrestling, especially at that time, was like a therapy, like a saving grace, like a safe space where I'd go to the club and I'd feel like, it was like a home, and it was somewhere where I can get out my aggression and really like, feel better at the end of the day.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you
Yeah.
there. People, you're kind of glossing over the way that those types of things, like that dad telling you that you should try a different sport, or you should be in Special Olympics or whatever. You're glossing over the way that that made you feel, and you're also glossing over your reaction to it, because here's the truth of it, right? You had a really good support system around you. Your parents, your brother. So you had a great support system around you. How did you as a 14-year-old eighth grader for the first time, hearing what people don't usually get hate, right? Like they don't get haters until they're old enough to have 1 million followers on Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't get that hate until like a lot later in life, usually, I would assume. So how did you, as a 14-year-old knucklehead that didn't know shit about shit, how did you deal with that type of scenario, and how did you come out the other side of it?
Yeah, man, I would say it borderline broke me, like mentally. It was like demoralizing. Like I didn't even understand it because I was so young, like you said, I don't know anything about anything. But I'm like, my mindset is I'm just trying to be one of the kids. I'm trying to fit in. I'm trying to have like a so-called normal life. And I felt like people were always trying to take stuff away from me that I actually wasn't as good as I was because people were always saying these types of things. It really pissed me off. And like, because I have good hearing, I would hear coaches say stuff during my matches, and I let it really affect me, and especially in the beginning and towards the end even. And it caused me to have this like chip on my shoulder that I didn't even realize until looking back at the documentary, that I just felt constant pressure to like prove myself, I think. And it was heavy. Like it was a lot, and it caused me a lot of like emotional roller coasters. Because picture a kid not so great at the sport, trains, gets good at the sport. No one's going to say like, oh, that's a fluke or you're just lucky. Like he worked his ass off. But for me, it was like you add blindness into the mix. You already feel behind, and like you have to prove yourself to people to show them you're not just some like, pushover or whatever it is. And I felt like that really affected my emotions mentally, like bad. Like,
Of course, how could it not? But here's the question: you didn't let it affect your training, and you didn't let it affect your motivation in the sport, and you didn't let it affect your discipline. So how do you, as a dopey kid, right? Because it's not that you were particularly dopey, but just all kids are dopey, right?
Yeah.
At 14, the kids are just knuckleheads, right? And so how did you, as a dopey kid, turn that pain? Because it's awfully painful. I saw it in you, man. I felt 1% of it because I wanted to go bite those people's noses off their face and spit it back in their mouth. And that was 1% of it. Like, think about that. I mean, and for me to, I want to kill these people when they said that stuff to you. And how did you, as a young kid, make your bones with that and then continue to stay focused on training?
It's a good question. I really think because of just how I am, like giving up is never an option. I always talk about it. Like I could have just given up when the school wouldn't accept me because of my blindness. Like there were so many things, and like people saying like you don't belong in this sport. But I truly believed like the training, I'll be straight up, I hate competing. Competing is the worst thing in the world. I was a head case. Like I was a lot better than people that I would make better than me in my head. Like I was in a wrestling room, I could beat anyone because I was comfortable. I was, it was what I was used to. And then when I would go out and compete, I would think about all these things and like how I have this whole other weight on my shoulders of hoping the referee like understands what's going on even, and that there's no like political BS. I think training was what got me.
Which, by the way, was a real thing.
Yeah.
That the officials, there were ones that would not blow the whistle.
It was bad. It got dangerous.
Yeah. He was catching double eggs with his face way more than he needed to. Like
Yeah.
way more than he needed to.
And we
like,
developed a system to make me confident against that, though, where I stay low and be ready for that. But why should I, why does that have to be a thing?
Yeah. It's not good.
Especially the higher level you get, the more contact you need.
One of the things you talked about was you were able to stay real motivated after a loss and wanted to continue to build, where you had friends, or lots of people generally, they'll lose interest. They'll be motivated after they lose, but then a couple of days later they're off doing whatever. How do you think that you continued to stay motivated and to build and maintain that drive over long periods of time?
I know a lot of people say this, but I can truly mean it. Like, wrestling definitely saved my life. I think I would have gone down a really shitty path, but also I don't know. Like, I'm sure I would have found something, but there were so many things around me that were not good, especially growing up in like a small beach town. There's a lot of like, drugs or unmotivated kids and stuff. And I always felt out of place around everyone. Like, I always felt different. And wrestling was like almost like an identity to me at that time. Because when I left high school, I didn't know what the hell I was going to do with my life. And I'm like a really motivated person. Like I said earlier, like when there's a mountain to climb, like I'm obsessed with trying to achieve that goal. And it's a blessing and a curse, because I've learned later in life too that you really need to, you have these big goals, but you have to have these little goals along the way to like have little wins. And that's been really successful for like, the things we're doing now or whatever it might be. Cause like the main goal is really overwhelming, and to have like little, stepping stones along the way is huge. Just to stay motivated, I was around the right people. Like, I really bought into, if I find a leader that really I can trust. Like, Mike was the type of person, when I started having a relationship with him as a coach and his student, Mike could tell me to jump and I wouldn't even ask how high. I'd just jump as high as I fucking could.
Yeah.
And that, I really bought into the club was a saving grace to me, because we had CrossFit. Like, we were doing the CrossFit workouts. Like, there was so much stuff that was giving me confidence. Like, the first time I did a 24-hour lock-in at the club, I literally felt like I could do anything in the world. And I still think about that, like, to this day, when I have to do something, somewhat hard. I'm like, dude, I was locked in a wrestling club for a day and worked out every hour. And it's little things like that.
For those of you that don't know, I had this awful idea. I guess it was probably about 15 years ago was the first one, something like that. Maybe it was 2009. Right? Like,
Yeah,
2009, 2010.
I was like freshman in high school.
Yeah. So somewhere around there, I had this bright idea. And the way that I got it was Joe DeSena from Spartan used to run the death race, which I think he still does. He found his way back to that stuff. But before it was Spartan and all that kind of stuff, they had this death race, and I did it, and it was the most miserable friggin' experience in my life. And so but it broke me. It broke me mentally completely, for sure. And I asked the guy that won the race, I'm like, yo, how did you train for this? He's like, oh, well, I would get up every hour on the hour and run a mile for 48 hours straight. And I'm like, well, that sounds awesome. And so I said, well, maybe we could do that, something like that in wrestling. We can't wrestle a match for 24 hours straight.
Yeah.
Because somebody would die.
Yeah.
But we kind of supplemented matches sometimes with full body workouts, like, I don't know, 100 burpees or 40 burpees or something like that. And so we would do a 7 to 15 minute workout at the top of every hour for 24 hours straight. And I started doing this stuff, and I was like, holy smokes. It caught on. It caught on really, like a lot of people. I was doing them all over the country. It was Joel, it was taking years off my life.
Oh, I can imagine.
Dude,
You
it
mean
was
getting up every hour and not getting a solid sleep at any point during a day?
Dude,
Is
Mike
it-
woke me up at 3 a.m. and he's like, I'm sleeping against the wall. And he wakes you up at 3 a.m. and he's like, all you have to do is 50 pull-ups. I slept walk over to the pull-up bar and did 50 in a clip. I've never done it before, never done it since, and I just went back to sleep.
and he
now.
literally walked back to the exact same spot, which first of all, like there's so many different things that like have made me scratch my head about Anthony Ferraro. But that, and first of all, he didn't just do them on a bar. He did them on like a Ninja Warrior ledge. Okay. Like he just cranked out 50 absolutely perfect strict pull-ups and goes and sits down and just literally just kind of nods his head off to the side and he's out like a light. It was, I'm like, how did you know what spot you were just in and that there was no one in it in your stead? And like there was just so many different questions that I had, but I'm like, oh, I'm gonna let the kid sleep because he did his 50 pull-ups.
Well, if they were in it, they're screwed because I just make a map of when I get up to where I'm going and then I know how to get back. Every time in my life now, even like everywhere I go, I always map out where I'm going so I can get back.
Okay, I'm gonna add to that. Listen to this, Joel. And I know this is becoming like the, we're just kind of flowing back and forth between me and Ant, but I do want you to know this because it's like super cool to me. Anthony said earlier that he has really good hearing. That is the understatement of the century. The dude has full-on superpowers. So he said, when Ant started coming to the club in Wall, we moved to a new place up in Morganville, which is like 20 minutes up the road, right? That day, the first day of practice, he called me at like, I want to say like noon or something like that. And he's like, well, what time is practice? I said, well, your class starts at 7:30. He goes, well, can I get there at like 4? I'm like, yeah, sure, man. I don't care. I'll be here. I was just cleaning up the place, just getting this place ready for the first classes. I didn't think anything of it, but I literally I'm cleaning up and he walks in. And I'm like, hey, Ant. He's like, hey, how you doing? And he just continuously walked around the place with a cane for, I don't know, 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. But then when I said at 7:29, all right, everybody up and jog, he was the first one up and jogging and he wasn't tripping over anything. And I'm like, oh, this dude was mapping the place.
Yeah.
All right. So, and now another time, I'll never forget this. And I like Ant said, we would do strength training workouts before class, right? So there's weights clanging, there's music blaring, there's probably 30 people in the room. And by the way, garage doors are open. So it's like a full, like it's in the summertime. It was 175 degrees in there. And this kid, an arbitrary kid, his name is Pete Ottaviano. Okay. Pete Ottaviano walks in and he goes, hey, what's going on, guys? Anthony doesn't turn and just goes, what's up, Pete? And every one of us stopped. And we're like, that's bullshit, bro. How'd you know it was Pete? That's bullshit. How did you know it was Pete? He goes, well, it smells like Pete. And I'm like, that's some X-Men shit. You can't just be like, oh, it smells like Pete.
You guys have smells, man.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. But like none of us are like an X-Men in that regard. So, all right. So if you were to tell, what do you call people that have all their sight?
Able body.
Yeah.
Or sighties.
Sighties, right. Yeah. That's the one I was getting at.
Yeah, sighties. Yeah, that's what I called you.
Yeah. And you fucking sighties. All right. Yeah, all right, we get it. Sorry. But what would you tell someone with all of their faculties about them how to enhance other forms of their senses? Because it's pretty impressive. Like we talk about feel in this sport a lot, and you exemplified it.
Thanks to you, man. We worked out we had a system down to where you had me feeling when people would tense up before they changed their level, and I'd be able to predict that. And that stuff like went leaps and bounds. And because I started late in the sport too, so it's like relatively, because everyone starts when they can start walking, basically. And I started in 7th grade, kind of behind. And what I would tell them is I wasn't born with that. Like, I wasn't born with super, like, sonic hearing or smell or whatever. But all you sighties take your other senses for granted because your sight's so good that you don't hone, like, you rely on your sight for 98% of the things you do. And I have to rely on everything else to fill in for my lack of sight. So it's basically just like anything else, like wrestling, for example, you only get better by doing it. So I just would rely on my ears and my smell and my touch so much. Like, I didn't use a cane for the first half of my life. One, because I was an idiot, and two, because I just was against it. And I would use like my feet. Like, I walked around barefoot all the time because I'd be able to feel things better. And I would have all these little things I was doing to try and make myself not look blind that the normal sight person wouldn't even notice, because it's just the littlest things that make a difference.
What are some ways I run a wrestling club, I work at a wrestling club as well, and I'm curious, when you have kids who might be a little bit different or may have some sort of disability, what is the most appropriate way to treat them? Is it something where you just try and treat them like everybody else? Is it something where you kind of cater to them? What exactly do you think is kind of the best way to go about doing that?
Definitely treating them like everyone else, but maybe understanding that some things might be harder for them. So just having extra patience in certain areas. But I'm the worst person to ask this question to, because I'm the most like unpolitically correct blind person. Like, I want to be treated just like everyone else and make fun of me. So it's like an icebreaker even. Like, I don't care, like, but it all depends on the relationship. Like, as you get a better relationship with them, you start to understand like how they are. So I think that's big too. It's just like
there wasn't a disability that was safe in our club. Like, there wasn't one. Like,
no.
Like, we would, like, if a kid was slow, like, forget it. Like, you were stone foot.
Everyone
there wasn't like, and Paul couldn't hear worse shit. And I was like, I'm like fucking Ellis Island over here. Give me your poor, your blind, your deaf.
Paul was Helen and I was Keller.
I didn't say that. That's not
true. I
true.
did.
Never did.
I did. That was mine.
Good. But yeah, I don't know, man.
You said the most powerful thing to me, and I'm sorry if this comes across mean to the listeners, but when you said to me, I'll never forget, I think I was in like probably a freshman or sophomore in high school, and I'll never forget, we were sitting against the wall in Morganville, and we were just having a talk, and you were like, I was getting annoyed about something, and you were like, listen, Ant, you're blind. That's not changing anytime soon. And the rest of the world isn't blind. So you need to buck the fuck up, more or less. And it was like, it sounds mean, but it was the realest thing anyone ever said to me. And I remember walking away from that, like, empowered, like, you know what? I am fucking blind. I guess I got to figure this shit out. Like, stop worrying about the fact that, why am I blind? Like, you're blind. That's just how it is. So figure it out. And that really like changed my life in a lot of ways.
Well, I'm glad that my over exuberance and could have played a part in that. We got a little bit of time left. Can we talk about some of the things that happened after high school?
Yeah. So after high school, I graduated in 2013. I went to TCNJ for like a year and a half, got a concussion wrestling, and then stopped wrestling. And once I stopped wrestling, I was like, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing here. All I knew was wrestling. I used to wake up, wrestle, go to school, wrestle, and not get home till like 11 o'clock at night. And, it kind of lost I end up getting super depressed, like really depressed. It's kind of that age, like 19 years old, where things, you're trying to figure out life, what you're trying to do your whole life. And I got really, just really down and like making excuses and just smoking copious amounts of pot, like not being good in like productive ways. And I actually got to the point where like my parents were trying to help me. I was having all these breakdowns, and it got to the point where I checked myself into a mental hospital. Like 19 years old, I checked myself in. I was like, I'm nothing good is happening right now. I don't feel good about myself. I'm so depressed to the point where it's scary. And like I'm not like gonna kill myself, but like that thought creeps across your mind. You're like, whoa, something's not okay here. Like I need to talk to someone. And might have been extreme what I did, checking myself in, but it was like a real big blessing at the time because I went to this place for like 4 days, and I I got like help. Like I got to talk to people, and I went to like an outpatient program after, and then I like started, being like, all right, Aunt, like enough is enough. Stop being a bitch. Like stop babying about everything and saying woe is me type of thing. And I made the sporadic decision to move to California where my buddies were in Northern California, grew pot for like a year and a half, and nothing was happening out of that period of my life. I wasn't growing. I was like the only thing I was growing was pot. Like I wasn't growing emotionally or mentally, and I felt like at a stagnant like standstill. Like I need to be doing more. Like there are people like, why are you here? Like I feel like you belong doing way more than this. And like my buddy even used to joke, he's like, dude, you belong like training for the Olympics or something. And then I get a call in California one morning that so Chris, they made the documentary, my brother and Chris, after 2 years of it being on the shelf, Chris takes it down and he's like, I got to put something together. He puts together the first 15 minutes and loves what he has. Like he's like, this is a great story. I can't wait to show Ollie, my brother. And the 2 days before they were supposed to meet for Ollie to see the first 15 minutes of the film, he didn't wake up at the age of 27 and passed away in his sleep. And I get a phone call in California, that my brother died. And it was like the world just stopped. Like I was hanging in outer space, like how the fuck is this real right now? Like this shouldn't happen. Nothing was pointing towards this direction type of thing either. And I remember I just had to like suck it up. I didn't want to go home. I was so scared to go home, to the point where my brother John flew out and dragged me home. And I went home, and at Ollie's funeral, Chris like vowed that no matter what it takes, he's gonna finish the film, and he did that. And then the trailer went kind of viral across all these platforms. And I'm sitting at home, I'm feeling sorry for myself. My mom also just had a traumatic brain injury where I was the one to find her like months after my brother passed away. And like all these things were happening in life, and I'm feeling sorry for myself again. And I'm like seeing all this stuff with the film. I'm like, oh, I want to train more. Like I want to get after something. Like I feel so like lost and like at a pause or plateaued. And I get a phone call, and they're like, this is the United States Olympic Committee. Is this Anthony Ferraro? And I'm like, I think you have the wrong number. And they're like, no, we actually saw your documentary. If you have any of that talent left from wrestling, that's how they worded it, would you consider training judo for the Paralympics? And I was like, I literally said, let me call you right back. And I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mom, my dad, no one. I called Mike Melanconico. And I was like, hey, I just got a call from like the United States Olympic Committee about doing judo for the Paralympics. He's like, why are you still on the phone with me? He's like, tell them, yeah. And I did. From that point on, I trained judo. Took like 3 years of training really hard, going to like Japan, Brazil, Germany, England, all these places, like self-funded, getting myself to all these places and learning a whole new sport, to where in 3 years I got like became first in the country, and I was like top 20 in the world. And before the Olympics, like a couple tournaments before, I was really close to making it. I tore my groin 2 days before a tournament, and I was out for like a year. So I couldn't do anything anymore. And I was like, well, I need to like figure something out. Like, judo's not going to be here all the time. What the hell am I doing? I'm putting all my eggs in this basket and like without any other avenues in my life, And the pandemic was happening. I was with my girlfriend, now wife at the time, or yeah, now wife at the time. She's my girlfriend, and I was like, I need to do something. Like, I got to figure this out. And like, everything was paused. The world was shut down. I started playing my guitar a lot more and like live streaming it on Facebook to people. And I was like, live streaming to the world, whatever. Like, it would make people smile for that time. And then we decided like we got to do something more with this. We took it on the road and we went 10,000 miles across the country in 7 weeks and set up in all these remote locations and live streamed to the world, me playing music. We branded the whole tour and all this stuff. We've done like 2 of them now. And when we got home, when I say live streaming to the world, I mean like 3 people on Facebook. and we got home and we're like, we did it though. We just went 10,000 miles. Like, it was scary. We had no idea how it was going to go. There's a lot of stuff that happened, but we made it and we did it. We made a plan, executed it. And I was like, I feel like there's more people like, I feel like I have a story to share with people that could help. If it helps one other person, it's like a win. And since I was a little kid, I always said I just wanted to help people. And that's when she was like, I was like, I want to reach more people online and all this stuff. And she's like, you should do a dance on TikTok with your cane. Like, maybe you'll go viral. And I was like, fuck no. Like, I'm not doing that. Get away from me. And I started researching a little, seeing that like people were doing like vlog stuff, showing about their lives. So I said, why don't I just introduce myself? And I did. I was like, I'm Anthony. I look normal, right? There's one thing different. I'm blind. And then I started going through the things I do, like motivational speaking, podcasting, music, all that stuff. And I went to sleep with like 10 followers and 100 views. And then I woke up with like tens of thousands of views and like a couple thousand followers and all these messages of people being like, please like tell us more. Like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Like, you are really helping me in my life, like not make excuses. Cause I say the only disability is a bad attitude. And then it's like, we made a 30-day plan to keep posting and telling, the story about me and different things. And it just kept blowing up like wildfire, like videos going viral, like millions of views, and, it transforming to other platforms like Instagram and YouTube and all this stuff. And then I used to cry to my dad in college, like, how am I ever going to have a family? No one's ever going to love me. I'm never going to be able to support anyone. Because when I was in high school, I had a girlfriend and her parents made her break up with me because they're like, he's blind. He's never going to be able to drive you anywhere. He's never going to be able to take care of you. And that really affected my self-esteem with that stuff. And then, fast forward, now I'm getting brand deals. I'm getting more speaking jobs. I'm starting to make money. My wife is able to work less, and we got married, and like now we're having a kid in less than a month. So it's like wild how life just works. You're like so scared of everything in the beginning. How is it ever going to happen? It only happens by doing it like one foot in front of the other, and just I like to say,
make sure that cane goes in front of those 2 feet, though.
cane in front. But yeah, that's what happened.
One of the things you mentioned was how central being a wrestler was to your identity. When you were a little bit younger, and once that was taken away, you felt a bit lost. I think this is kind of a common thing with lots of high-level athletes. What do you think are kind of some strategies to help find balance there? Is it something where you need to dive in there, or something where you can kind of be multiple things at once?
I am a firm believer now. I used to think you could only do that, but I'm a firm believer now of like, dude, diversify your like portfolio, like do as many things as you can and see what works. Because you could be chasing the dragon your whole life and never get there, and you missed out on so many other opportunities. So I think it's important to take things as they come too, and not just be one track minded. And it's hard because at high levels they tell you can only do this, you have to do this 24/7, but I think it's starting to change a little now where
I agree.
It's more healthy to take those breaks, like mental breaks, and really like you have to have fun in life too. Like it can't be a grind 24/7 or you're gonna hate it.
Yeah, it's Yeah, it's tough, right? Because like, you know, we did this while I was still at Flow, we did this documentary on, I guess it was kind of on addiction, but really what I wanted it to be about was like addiction in wrestling, and it was more about like Gregor Gillespie and his story. But then there were some side stories that, man, we had 3 people very close to the club all die within like a 1 week period of time back in 2017, I believe it was. But you get enough of these kids that fall into addiction, fall into depression, fall into all these things, and you look at what the common denominator is. And I think wrestling is a through line there for many of them. And I think what Joel said earlier, like, these people aren't equipped when that one thing that they have centralized their life around is taken away from them. Because inevitably wrestling is going to, unless you're a dope like me and just take a vow of poverty for your whole life and just decide
You're
that,
like a nun in wrestling.
oh, it's the worst idea ever. Like, I go back, like I think about, like, I had the aha moment in wrestling when I was like 17 and I was like looking around Ernie Monaco's room at the Edge going, well, I know how much I pay, and I can just assume how much that like the rest of the people in this room pay.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And then, but I was only taking head count at one particular time in the year, not the rest. So anyway, but the point is though, that like most people, it's going to end. And what do you do, Ant? What do you do when that identity is ripped from you? How do you build yourself back?
Well, you make a good point. Like hearing you talk about this too kind of sparks a thought of wrestling is your addiction.
Yeah.
And you're addicted to it. Like that's your drug. Like because it's all you know, it's all you do, it's your identity. You know, you're constantly looking for your next fix, or like, you know, learning new stuff or getting another medal or whatever it is. And when it ends, like many addicts do, you have to fill that void with another addiction. And that's what ends up happening. Not saying that's the right thing to do, but
no, it's inevitable.
It's inevitable because you didn't have anything else that was giving meaning or fuel to your life, like to your journey. And I think, you know, when you leave wrestling, it's kind of like starting over, like from scratch, which is scary because, you know what, you either coach or you kind of got to walk away from it at a certain point. And I think it's so important, like I said, like just to try new things, like to have fun and to if you asked me 10 years ago, would I ever be, you know, so-called internet famous or whatever the hell you want to call it, I'd tell you to go F yourself.
Yeah.
I remember you trying to tell me about Twitter when I was in like freshman in high school. And I was like, sounds stupid. And,
Well,
and if I listened to you, it would have been really helpful. But everything happens at the right time in life, I believe. And I just think it's important for people. You got to talk to people too. That's the most important. You got to talk to people that have been through it, because whatever you're doing in life, 9 times out of 10, there's someone that's gone through it before you. So I think finding someone that you could look up to and, you know, have that voice of reason to you to help you think about things in a different way is huge.
Makes sense to me. All right, Ant, we got to wrap this up. Tell us where everyone can see Anthony Ferraro.
Oh,
even though he can't see them.
Joel
Shaw, don't you put your hand in your face, Joel Shaw. That was freaking good. That was freaking good.
That was a little hacky. You're a hack comedian. You can find me. Everything's on asfvision.com, and the film's A Shot in the Dark on Amazon Prime and Hulu and Hulu and Vimeo and Apple TV, Google Play. So yeah, thanks a lot, man. It's great talking to you guys.
Anthony,
love you, brother.
Talk to you very soon, brother. I love you very much. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for everything. Later, Joel.